Hi guys, Gnembon here, and welcome to 22nd episode of Fun Farms. We'll go back to episode 20 as soon as dust settles over Update Aquatic, I promise. But for now, let's look at the Kelp Fuel and XP farm. However, before we do that, we need to talk about recent changes to the game mechanics introduced in pre-release 8. I typically try to not to bitch a lot about changes in game mechanics, like we just have to adjust. But this one not only pretty much breaks most water-based farms and contraptions, but also was introduced literally couple days before the scheduled final release. Changing fundamental game mechanics is not something that you should be doing in pre-releases, which should be just about bug fixing. I know they had to switch to pre-releases probably because marketing had said so and they were still falling behind, but couple days before the release with such a big change, it's a no-no. So quick recap on the ice farm. They fixed the bug where flowing water was freezing at random, so that's good. You've also informed me that you don't need to rebind your mouse keys to use it AFK. You can simply depress the mouse buttons you want to keep pressed, disconnect your mouse, and that's it. You can even reconnect your mouse and until you press the button again, the game thinks it's still pressed. I honestly didn't know about it, and that's really useful. For example, if you are clearing a large area, you don't need to keep the mouse pressed. And in order to just go back to normal, just click once and should be back. Thanks a lot for that tip. So I was like, that's awesome, the farm should be working fine right now, but was I mistaken? It turns out that due to a recent change in pre-release 8, the water doesn't push living entities as much, which is a little bit weird. It does push a player full force for the first 5 water levels from the source. In the next 2 it does push much less, and the last one it only pushes you slightly if you have decided to leave, otherwise it keeps you in place. So in short, the water streams in this ice farm now are too long to keep you moving. I mean, the solution is simple, just shorten the water streams to max 5 blocks length, and that fixes it. Yeah, but because now your speed fluctuates significantly as you go along, this breaks the rhythm of player breaking ice, which causes a lot of ice to be left on the platforms. So now we cannot really rely on water reflashing mechanics to get the items back to the player. Now there is a solution to it as well, and because of the fixed bugs with freezing flowing water, it's actually a very good approach. And it involves using shorter segments and reflash them only from one side, so you don't have those water sources here at the start of the segment. So only when you're done with the segment, then the water is restored using the water sources here in the back and on the side. The divider is only 2 blocks wide. We have here water sources to flush the one segment and then solid blocks that are hard to break like planks on the other side, and that's it. You don't want to keep the segments too long, because if some water randomly freezes on us as we go by, or the player decides to eat, it will only reflash the segment up to that point since there is no water on the other end to help. But if we keep them like 20-30 blocks wide, that should be all fine. Again, in case some ice in the platform is not fully frozen, it's also not a big deal, as it will be back to a few % loss on the segment from the moment all the water prematurely reforms on the platform. But since the segments are not that long anymore, it should only affect us for a very short while. I won't be doing a refresher on this farm at this point because things can change at any point again, really. But if the mechanics gonna stay as they are right now or something's gonna change yet again, I may do a short video with the updated design. So that's in terms of the ice farm. The change with water mechanics that I was alluding to and mobs is really significant. Now there are 2 types of mobs, the one that sink in water like skeletons, zombies, and the one that don't, like creepers. So I'm here just a little bit far off the ground just to eliminate the wandering behavior. And what it seems like, what I can see here, if there is less of the mob in water, the slower is being pushed along. And it doesn't feel like this force changes continuously. For the first 5 blocks, seems like it's as it used to be before. Then for the next 2 blocks it's slower. And then for the last blocks it can only sustain the previous momentum. And that's for all the mobs that sink. Creepers, for example, float up, and creepers are shorter, so at some point it will simply stall because technically it's not in water, yet it floats on top of it, so I don't know. If you let him bob, he'll eventually move, as when he bobs down, his water immersion, I guess, is deep enough to move him along. But this bobbing in the middle of the water current looks really pathetic. It used to look like at the end of the water current if the mob cannot get out of the water. Now it looks like that in the middle of it. How does it affect pretty much all water-based farms and contraptions? I don't think I need to say. And as I said at the beginning, changes in mechanics are okay, just not a few days before the release. You can to some extent adjust the designs. Here I have the same kind of a diamond water pad that I used for my house-style mob farm, just limited with fence gates to 6 long on this side and to 5 long on this side. And that solves the problem, especially if you let the mobs, as I said, bob up and down, but significantly reduces the area of effect of water. So previously each pad, if you take all the water reach, had 113 spaces. If you limit the water currents to 5 long, this brings the number down to 41. So as I said, it's something that can be done and fixed, just water-based farms and contraptions are now much more annoying to make, even for things like very basic spawner setups, where we can't really push all the mobs down with water streams. Enough complaining, let's focus on the topic at hand, kelp farms. In my 113 suggestions video, I said that kelp makes a really poor fuel source, and some of you didn't agree, saying that it can be a very practical solution as farming kelp is very easy. The crafting it to kelp blocks is a pain in the butt, but with a decent setup, it could be manageable. There's also a very specific reason why I'm here still in pre-release 2 at the moment, and that's, you guessed, due to another bug which was introduced in pre-release 3 and pretty much wrecks the simple kelp designs we have here. It is, quote, a really bad bug, according to some people that deal with bugs in this game, so it might be fixed, but since we are too close to the release, it's likely it will stay for a while since it doesn't cause worlds to crash. I will provide an alternative solution at the end of the video in case this doesn't get fixed for whatever reason, but let's hope it won't be necessary. So let's start with a fuel-focused kelp farm. Kelp grows pretty fast comparing to some other crops, but not as fast as anybody would want it to grow. So for a decent output you have to go with volume. Width-wise, we have here 2 sections of 7 plants for easy item collection in the middle using water streams, and the harvest happens periodically using a flying machine that cuts the kelp right above the ground. Pretty standard way of doing it. Ilmango was showing before a similar setup as well. In my case, I'm using only one flying machine for both segments. For those who are observant, it's exactly the same type I used for my sugarcane farm, the 13th episode of the series. So instead of going for a waterproof design for the flyer, I thought just put the observers below the flying machine so they face the floor and are simply not affected by water, which solves the water update issues. Since it's a basic basic swimming machine, it requires a return station, which in this case is also very simple, and I borrowed it from my sugarcane farm. We detect arrived sweeper with an observer and then power this dispenser with a delay, which gets detected by observer in the flying machine in a proper moment, which sends the flyer back. Optionally, there's a lever which you can use to dock the machine here if we, for example, need to do some maintenance up front. Since raw kelp has no use apart from smelting, I thought instead of sending it to the front after harvesting, we can use this space in the middle to host the smelters and smelt the kelp right as it's getting collected in this section. The reason I divided the kelp field into these 10 log sections is because I noticed that the reforming water and slime blocks of the flying machines have tendency to push the broken kelp to the front of them, and creating these predefined sections allows to distribute better the kelp for smelting. In each section we have 3 furnaces and a water stream to push the collected kelp from the back to the front, which distributes roughly uniformly across these 3 furnaces. Also, the amount of kelp that is being collected in each section is roughly what it needs to keep these 3 furnaces busy most of the time, and then after smelting, the dried kelp is being sent to the front. Since the hopper pipes can transfer up to 9,000 items per hour, we can only have up to 25 furnaces pointing into a single hopper. So in this case we have 24, so it's 8 sections for 3 furnaces each. So we are operating roughly at the limit of item collection. The farm itself, as you can see, is quite straightforward to build. The walls don't need to be made of glass. You can simply dig into the mountain wall and just leave it all stone as you wish, but glass provides a nice lookout into the kelp farm. In pre-releases 2 and below, kelp needed to be planted in water source blocks, so you need to first flood the bottom layer and then place the seed plants. In pre-release 3 and above, it can be placed in flowing water, but since it's easier to plant them while breathing air, I would recommend doing the same in the newer versions as well. Then we would want to place some temporary blocks 1 block below where the collection water stream is gonna go, create the water streams that push the items to the middle, and then punch out all the temporary blocks. From now on, kelp will be able to grow into the flowing water above it, which would change them back into the source blocks. Kelp can grow randomly into any height from 1 to 25 blocks high, which is predetermined at the moment when kelp is planted or broken. If you look at the age parameter on the F3 screen, if it's 25, the kelp won't grow anymore, but if it's less, then the plant each time it's randomly ticked has 14% chance of growing by 1 and increasing the age of the head by 1 as well. However, if we break the top at age 25, we are essentially rolling the new height at this point for the new stem, which means that we could grow a kelp from 0 to build limit by breaking it when it doesn't want to grow anymore. Since kelp replaces flowing water it grows into and with source blocks, it's also a simple method of replacing a column of flowing water with water sources, for whatever reason you would need it. Like to make a fast elevator using soul sand and bubble columns that actually require water sources, not flowing water. I know, you can just place the water sources in a column using ice, but growing them with kelp is way cooler. Anyways, in this case I made the tank 10 blocks high. At the 9th block I placed a row of observers that detect if any of these 7 plants grow into this 8th stage, and this triggers the item collection. Technically it is possible that none of these 7 plants would grow into these observer faces, but the probability of this happening with 7 plants is very slim. It's like 0.03% in this case, so nothing to worry about, but in case this happens, the farm can be triggered manually. So if any of the plants here grow up to this level, the signal is sent to the bottom that sends the flying machine out. You don't want also to go too high with the tanks, because the higher the tank, the rarer the collection is gonna be, which means that you need some extra storage at the furnaces to hold up all the kelp temporarily. I found that at this height, so 10 blocks, it works out perfectly, where hoppers attached to the furnaces fill up like most of the way. So the width of the kelp tank is determined by the length of the water streams and luckily matches the width of the flying machine. The length of this segment is to match the output of 3 furnaces working in each segment, and the heights of the trigger detectors are determined by the temporary storage for the furnaces. And number of growth detectors is based on limiting the chance of getting stuck, so all of these plants are not able to grow into that level. Up front we have a storage for dried kelp, in this case it's 16 double chests that will fill up in about 7 hours. In this case the hopper pipe that delivers the item is gonna back up with dried kelp at this point, and if that happens the override protection will kick in, which will send the flying machine for the last time and shut it down until we clean up the storage again. To craft all the kelp blocks we need an axe, a chest to have a spot in the inventory for them, fill up most of your inventory with kelp blocks and leave a few spots in the hotbar for dried kelp. Then you would want to break a few chests, let's say 4 at a time is a good approach, craft the dried kelp back into the blocks, and then put the kelp blocks back into the top chest. There is a temporary chest here up top that stores the backlog of kelp blocks for smelting, and just need to make sure that this one gets filled up first before we send the rest of the kelp blocks into the storage. After we replace all the empty chests, eventually this hopper starts to empty again, which will unlock the kelp harvesting again, and that's how we repeat the cycle. So how good of a fuel farm it is then? In the 7 hours we should be able to obtain 6000 kelp blocks, but half of them is gonna go towards fueling the furnaces back again, because we need to smelt 9 kelp for 1 block. So in total we are getting about 500 kelp blocks per hour for ourselves, which we can use then to smelt 10,000 items per hour, which is about 3 double chests. We can compare it to, for example, a single spawner based blaze farm, which will give us about 1000 blaze rods per hour, which is good for about 12,000 items. So a little bit more, but this will require our constant attention and killing of blazes as they come out. So there is a trade-off to it. Things like a tree farm, and I'm not talking here about those massive 2x2 spruce tree farms, but a decent small universal tree farm can give us about 10,000 logs per hour, which when smelted into charcoal using its own charcoal would give us about 8,000 charcoal per hour, so it's good for about 60,000 items per hour to smelt. So it's much better, but it requires bone meal. And again, players' attention. Another example, my relatively simple fortress farm along with 3 skulls per minute gives about 8,000 blaze rods and 5,000 coal per hour. And that's good for 140,000 items to smelt per hour, and we can go up from here with faster and more complicated designs. but it requires again another perimeter cleared and doesn't work very well with other people logged in at the same time on the server. And here's the thing. Here the only thing we have to do is to stay logged in and just AFK, and only every couple hours spend a few minutes on crafting, so it's a low effort early game fuel farm, low effort to build, low effort to run. It actually works out quite well. But there's another thing that Kelp has up its sleeve, and is the new ability of furnaces to properly store pretty much unlimited amounts of XP in themselves forever until the player decides to take it out. The thing is, for one dried kelp will only get 0.1 point of XP, so for a crafted kelp block 0.9. And the good thing about it is the fact that this XP is stored for later, so we can take it whenever we need it. This makes it technically the fastest way to absorb the XP by a player, although we would need to wait quite a bit before we can actually use it. And that's where the second design here comes into play, where I focus on the XP part of kelp smelting. So here we have 30 furnaces conveniently placed within the player's reach around the enchanting table, producing and storing about 1000 XP per hour, which is a little comparing to any other XP sources, but again, you sit here for 10 hours doing absolutely nothing and you can use this XP when you need it. So here, because we have 30 furnaces, we need to have a water stream of 11,000 kelp per hour, so more than a hopper can transfer. That's why I'm here using water streams to deliver the kelp. Also, that's why the actual farm for kelp is a little bit longer to deliver this 11,000 kelp. I'm also grabbing the smelted dried kelp with 2 hopper pipes into 2 sections of the storage, which I have increased to keep the farm running for 10 hours at a time. To make sure we don't run out of fuel for even smelting, the farm will shut down itself if the storage is full or if there is no fuel. One drawback of this particular solution is that the fuel needs to be backed up all the way to the top to ensure even access to fuel for all furnaces, but you can fill up the fuel line with something easier to obtain, like sticks, as long as it can burn. Also, to save on fuel, 4 out of 5 slots in the hoppers pointing directly into the furnaces fuel slots can be any items that is not fuel. Just keep them full stacks so the hopper is full most of the times, which will save on lag it causes. After each 10-hour AFK session, all the furnaces should be filled up with about 360 XP each, which is the same XP for killing 70 zombies. That will bring us from 0 levels to 30 levels by opening 4 furnaces. Each next one would allow us to enchant 1 more item at the maximum level, so we could technically enchant 26 items on maximum level with 1 AFK run of this farm. To fix an elytra, for example, it takes far less than just 1 furnace really. And to mend a diamond pickaxe from 0 to full, we just need to open 2 furnaces. And if you don't clean all the XP from all the furnaces between AFK sessions, like I haven't used any of the one on top in my testing, you might be pleasantly surprised. Okay, so what's up with the bug that you mentioned at the beginning that breaks these farms? So since pre-release 3, kelp started to grow into flowing waters that are not filled entirely with water, so like the water streams that we have here on top, and it will replace them with water sources, so how nice of it. So let's switch to pre-release 8 and see what happens. Yep, all the water streams are now just pooped. There are 3 solutions to this problem. We can wait until Mojang fixes it, which may not happen as I mentioned, because it doesn't crash the game and we are close to the release. We can build the tanks at least 25 blocks deep, which will work because none of the kelp will be able to grow into the water streams, but that would be quite pain in the butt to build those tanks that deep. Or we can use a secondary sweeper to collect the items. So here it is, the tanks is the same size. Here's the sweeper at the bottom that breaks the kelp. It actually sets off the sweeper at the top for item collection with a significant delay that allows all the items to peacefully flow to the top, and then the secondary sweeper at the top pretty much pushes all the items to the edge to be collected. The divider in the middle, now it's optional since we don't have a collection in the middle anymore, but items can only be bounced successfully with slime blocks. And with the open tank, the piston part of the pusher here in the middle simply loses items, because pistons are not capable of pushing those items that well. So it would be cool to have just one big open tank, especially that we can in this case, but it's actually more effective to expose only the parts where the slime blocks are on the flying machines. On the way back, the water sources from the front and from the sides allow to reform the top water layer, so we have a layer of water back again where items could float back up. But for that to happen, all the blocks below the sweeper need to be water sources, which we can obtain at the first place by letting all the kelp grow and replace all the flowing waters that we have left while building the tank with kelp and source blocks. The output has a convenient form of a water stream, so we can hook it up directly to a crafting spot or a furnace XP station, but I won't do it, I'm just showing it how it can be done, even with this bug still present. Although it would be nice if Mike decided to fix it at the first place. That's it guys for today, a little refresher on the ice farm with a few bug fixes and a whole lot of new and annoying bugs and the last minute changes with water and mob mechanics that have a profound impact on pretty much all previous water and mob contraptions, as well as a kelp fuel and XP farm. Quite decent way of obtaining early game fuel and XP by pretty much just AFKing with the unique ability to store the XP for later. I hope you enjoyed the video, learned something new, and if you did, don't forget to leave me a like, leave me a comment in the comment section below, subscribe if you're new, and see you in the next one. Bye bye!